Hello guys, welcome to a new edition of React today as part of the Volkswagen project. Today I'm going to confirm to you what I have told you for the last two programs, but since 4 years ago, since 2020. And that is the kind of government that we are being represented by. And that is nothing but the government that represents plutocrats, nothing else. And that book was written by Mrs. I have lost so much respect for the government of Canada that I don't even remember her name. Chrystia Freeland is the girl that produced that book. And when I publish my book, which is in the center of these books, my guests today, of course you, friends, and loving people of this channel, but these are the guests I have today, because I want you to read those books or consult them in case you already read them. We are being represented by plutocrats in government. The plutocrats tell them what to do, and they do as the plutocrats want. And that is something that we have to stop. Like I said, this is our chance to start all over again, and I'm talking about a democratic government after 2,300 years of no and zero democratic governments all around the world. I think that Europe, as I have mentioned before, and that is all the countries in the European Union are not represented by Mrs. van der Leyen. To the contrary, it's obvious that van der Leyen and their bureaucratic movements are supporting the plutocrats there, and the economic interests of the Jewish state, because it's not me saying, it's Bernie Sanders saying it, it's everybody knows that's true. I mean, just look at the 58 vows to the Barabbas or the King Netanyahu, as they considered him, and that is disgusting. Europeans, the peoples, the millions, the billions, let's say the millions of people that conform Canada, the United States, the European Union, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and the Nordic countries, we are not with the people that represent us in government, not whatsoever, and that is happening everywhere in the world. It's not only Canada, it's Germany, it's Europe.
A Dutch police investigation is underway after chaos erupted in the streets of Amsterdam overnight. 5 people were hospitalized and more than 60 detained. The city's mayor and the Dutch prime minister describe an outburst of violence that included targeted anti-Semitic attacks on Israeli soccer fans. Some Israeli fans were also accused of hateful chants and provoking people in the streets. The Israelis were in the Dutch capital for a game in a top European competition. These pictures show some of the street clashes after the game. Other video circulating online shows Israeli fans being punched and beaten while on the ground. Israeli officials have warned fans to leave the country as soon as possible. The Dutch prime minister said he was ashamed of the violence. Here's some more of what he told reporters.
We do everything we can to make them feel safe and secure in the Netherlands, and that's why we're acting upon. But there are always problems around football matches, and football match regarding the Israeli team also has special attention from the police. But the things that happened this evening, of last night, are just terrible, horrific, and as I said, I'm utterly ashamed of that happened in the Netherlands.
Earlier, we reached Zachary Newmark. He is the managing editor for the NL Times, an English news outlet based in the Netherlands. He was at a news conference held by Amsterdam's mayor earlier, and he explains what we know so far.
In total, 5 people were hospitalized. Around 30 or so suffered minor injuries. Those who were hospitalized have been released from the hospital. A total of 62 people were arrested. As of earlier this afternoon, 10 of them remained in custody. 8 of them are adults, 2 of them are minors as well. The city is trying to connect the dots on what exactly happened. Obviously, the city had created a number of high security, high risk areas that they designated before the match because they anticipated the possibility of violence. In this case, it seems to not have been enough this time around. As the mayor said during the press conference, the city has had to contend with about 3,000 demonstrations over the over the period of a year. Some of them are very small demonstrations. Obviously, some of them are very large, and the city has had a great many demonstrations, many of which have also resulted in violence related to the war between Israel and the Gaza Strip. So the concern was growing that with Maccabi Tel Aviv, the football club that came to play here last night, that this would also escalate into pro-Palestinian demonstrations that could then turn violent as well. That was kind of the nature of the concern. There was some issue with possibly supporters from Maccabi a couple of nights ago harassing taxi drivers and yanking down a Palestinian flag off the street. But earlier, the call went out on Telegram channels, also on Snapchat, calling for people to gather at Central Station with the prospect of assaulting, chasing, and attacking these Israeli supporters after the match.
That was Zachary Newmark, managing editor for the NL Times in the Netherlands. Police in Amsterdam did report a number of politically charged incidents before the attacks. Clashes between Israeli soccer fans and pro-Palestinian protesters, apparently related to the ongoing war in Gaza.
You have seen the crisis that Germany just begun with losing ministers and that are saying, okay, this is enough. We're going back down to the 15th century. What's going on here? Whom are we supporting here in order to be in these disastrous conditions? And now that the new president has come to be Mr. Donald Trump, but it's not going to be a happy ending for Europeans, especially because we all know that Donald Trump insists and wants the army, the navy, the Air Force, the armies of the world to pay 2% of their GDP, their gross domestic product, for weaponry, because Russia is the enemy. And you don't see that. I saw President of Russia this morning speaking calmly about, and there was BBC again, BBC, CBC, Sky News from Australia, Sky News from England, Piers Morgan to go there and make an appearance just to look good, because that's what he always wants to do. He plays the double moral ground and double argument. He plays for one side and then plays for the other, but he will always be pro-Israel, always. It's just that we, the people, know that he is always playing the double moral and the double argument for the people to hear what they want to hear, not necessarily the truth whatsoever. The same happened with Bernie Sanders, which I spoke to George Galloway a few years ago and anticipated how inefficient this person is and still is and was, even though we'll see other young fellows still believing in what he said. I don't. I believe that he is, of course, pro-Israel, even though he speaks against the lobby. And that book that you should read is very interesting. It explains determinism, because John Mearsheimer believes in a determinism that the economies and powers will go without changing. This is a determinism that, according to him, is what happens in the nature of politics, including war, of course, because war is an extension of politics, etc. Contrary to Jeffrey Sachs, we have talked about this before, and that is that I agree more with Sachs than with determinism of John Mearsheimer when he says that the politicians are that way and we have to accept it. Yeah, the relationship with Israel is wrong for America, it's bad for America, it's against the interests of America in the long term, in the short term. Every time that he speaks about Israel in that book, Mr. Stephen Walt, they speak about this matter, but they still insist in the last interviews. This book is like 12 years old, maybe 2008, I believe. But Jeffrey Sachs say, no, I don't agree with the determinism. We just need common sense and we need the courage and anti-corrupt people to change the future of the world and the nation, in this case America, and its relationship with Israel, in the case of the book that I'm speaking about. So why is this so important, and why do we have to care about this? Because, as Glenn Greenwald explains in his book that you see here, For Justice and Freedom for Some, this is the politics that we are living here, in Canada, in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, in the Western culture, in the Western tradition, which we still believe that conquer and destroy is the way to go. And we still believe that the Vikings still live in the world. And well, they do. And these Vikings are the foreign influence of the Nordic class, the European Nordic class, which believes that they're still going to conquer the world no matter what. But what they have not seen is that all of them, all this superiority that they predicted, that they claim to have, as Europeans, has been taken over, guess by whom? But the State of Israel since 1948, but even further since 1917, the Waldorf Declaration, etc., etc., because of the interest of the war. Like I said, it's not only technology that wins war, it's also a strategy. And that's why Putin is winning the war, because regarding all the science and the technology that is behind the United States, NATO, etc., Russia is kicking ass big time. And NATO is never going to receive Ukraine, even though there's a lot of saying about that. You can see Mr. Stoltenberg saying that things were going to happen this way, but the journalists prove him wrong.
Hvor mange land har Kina grepet inn I militært de siste 40 årene?
Det vi ser at Kina tar seg til rette
Vi kommer til det, men hvis du svarer på det spørsmålet. Hvor mange land har Kina grepet inn I militært de siste 40 årene?
De har vært inn I Vietnam.
Svaret 0. De 40 årene her har de ikke grepet
Vietnam
inn.
gikk de inn I?
Det tidligere enn 40 år.
Ja vel, men det I hvert fall... Ja.
Så hvis vi holder oss til den tidsrammen. Hvor mange land har Kina militære baser I rundt omkring I verden?
Et fåtall.
Et land. Djibouti har de en konkret militær base som de har bygd ut. Den stor. På motsatt side har USA angrepet minst 13 land I samme periode. Amerikanerne har 750 baser I minst 80 land. Mange av dem på dørstokken til Kina. Likevel så mener du at det Kina som utgjør en trussel.
Det jeg sier, det at Kina nå et land som blir stadig sterkere militært, investerer I store nye militærkapasiteter, også kjernefysiske våpen som kan nå NATO-territorium. Jeg sier at de tar seg til rette I Sør-Kina-havet. De bryter internasjonal rett. Norge som en kystnasjon var opptatt av at man opprettholder havretten. Filippinene, Malaysia og andre land har også protestert mot hvordan Kina tar seg til rette også på øyer og altså kontinentalsokkelen I Sør-Kina-havet. Vi ser hvordan de slår ned på demokrati. Hong Kong fengsler journalister, slår ned på demokratiske rettigheter, deler ikke våre verdier.
Men de har også ikke invadert fremmede land. De har ikke tatt livet av 100 000 av mennesker som
Men jeg litt usikker hvor du skal nå, fordi at det eneste vårt poeng bare at vi ser hvordan Kina bygger kraftig opp militært, hvordan de truer tar seg til rette I forhold til andre land, og hvordan de en viktig støttespiller for Russlands aggressive krig mot Ukraina. Det Kina som opprettholder Russlands krigsøkonomi, og som gjør dem I stand til å bygge de bombene, de rakettene og alt det andre som Russland nå bruker mot Ukraina. Og hvordan Kina og Russland stadig mer alliert militært og diplomatisk. Det det som gjør at det riktig at NATO tar Kina på alvor. Vi sier tydelig I våre uttalelser og vedtak at vi anser ikke Kina som en fiende. Vi mener det viktig å fortsette å snakke med Kina, handle med Kina, men vi mener det viktig å være klar over de sikkerhetspolitiske konsekvensene at Kina ruster opp, Kina allierer seg mer og mer med Russland, og Kina støtter Russlands krigføring I Ukraina. Så jeg litt usikker på hva den listen med spørsmål egentlig forandrer I forhold til det som hovedpoenget.
Hvem som utgjør den største militære trusselen, det var det som var poenget. Men vi må videre fordi vi har så få lite tid igjen.
Jeg tror nå, altså ikke nå
Jo, men det
Men
siste spørsmålet vi må bare stille
nå
om Trump.
nå har vi holdt på mye lenger enn vi avtalte.
Et spørsmål om Trump må vi stille.
Men du har for mange, du har for store ambisjoner.
Du har sagt at du tror at USA ikke vil endre sitt standpunkt til NATO hvis Trump kommer til makten.
Because we the people are not stupid like they are convinced since 1492 that we are stupid and that we can be conquered and bought off. And the majority of the elites of this world does exactly that. They bought by people in institutions like senates, chambers of commerce, treaties, trade treaties, etc. We spoke about that for years now. The World Bank, the International Trade Organization, the World Trade Organization, all these organizations tend to corrupt the politicians of not only third world countries. We used to believe it was the third world countries only, as I explained in my book, In Gold We Trust, Our Path to Eternity. And that was something that I hope that we have, that they will change their minds and they will abide by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and Freedoms. They are not, and they will never do, because they obeyed only to plutocrats. That's the problem in this world. But if there's something, not only the oil industry, the tobacco industry, and all the industries and lobbyists of the world that have this world as it is, with total indifference against their peoples. But for their elites, oh yeah, just for plutocrats, we're going to end up on a reset that we already spoke about. And that reset is not going to happen if we stop it. Otherwise, like this person in the World Economic Forum said, the elites are going okay. Everything is working for the elites. The problem is that the peoples in the world are not for the elites. And what will that be? Because you kill and destroy, just like the influence of Israel is doing in every country in the Western world. Is embarrassing to see how the politicians don't represent the peoples. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome.
Hey, who's going to win the game tonight, girls?
Oilers, the Oilers to win. We need to bring the cup home.
After 31 years, we do deserve it.
Yes, we deserve it. Connor McDavid deserves it, you know, honestly.
Well, everybody's relying on him only, and I don't think that's fair. The team is doing a good job already.
We're doing amazing.
We're doing amazing, eh?
Doing amazing.
Okay, so go Edmonton, say it again.
Go Oilers!
Amen! Thank you, girls.
One of those countries that we expected not to be in that list of idiots that serve, like you saw, the President Macron, you saw the President of Italy, the presidents of Europe, Ursula von der Leyen, who was speaking against Donald Trump, now is congratulating him, we're going to do things together, no problem. Those are the politics. False pretenses, true politicians. False pretenses, true politicians. That means lie is only convenience, mutual interest. They have oil, but they decapitate and kill their own people. Yeah, but we have mutual interest. Shut up, don't say a word. And make sure that the mainstream media don't speak about it. That's something that the people don't need to know. Let's keep it quiet. Don't do anything about it. And that's why I'm running for Prime Minister of Canada. FDRC Molano Elections 2025 at gmail.com. You can leave there your vote, your address, your phone number, so that we can confirm who you are, and that they're not going to come with, yeah, you didn't comply with this, you didn't comply with that, we cannot accept you. I have to be in the ballot. And that's the idea, to be in the ballot. So I need your support, your signatures, and your support to this channel. Today we're going to see why Canada is as liar as the United States and all these governments that are guided by plutocrats, supported by elites like the New Reset, which they call the Great Reset, disregarding God's word, but putting the bull first, and God never last. Who cares about God? See how Christians are treated in Israel, and how they say in in the Western countries that they love us, that Israel and Christians have the same values, shared values, and all. It's not true. I have explained that tirelessly. So when Glenn Greenwald says again, the last book there, exactly, that for justice, for truth and justice for some, with liberty and justice for some, is for them, not for us, the country and the world. So we need to react today to that matter, and that is the program today. And I'm going to begin with confirming what I have told you for years since the 2020 pandemic, and how the rich corporations get even richer by the billions of dollars a year, while we, the people, were in our houses indoors, and the politicians, they were there and party, man, with, I don't know, Beyonce and all those guys having a blast, the basketball players and the superstars not obeying the same mandates that the regular people was obeying. People with masks, you remember Boris Johnson without mask and having parties down the street of the Prime Minister's office, etc. We remember the United States and Europeans imposing the mandates to us. So since those days, we have discovered or I have discovered for you in this program, how hypocrite this working class is being submitted to by hypocrites like the ones that I just mentioned, and many more that support this issue. You have to see how Benjamin Netanyahu was explaining just yesterday the new railroads that are going to go through Palestine, through Lebanon, and to the new great Israel that he have envisioned for the world, against us, against the country, and against the world, like it has been proven forever, since 1947, but before, since 1917, and the occupation, and the 1925 first hub and first university for Jews only in Palestine, displacing the people, etc. We have talked about the 10 myths of Israel, about Israel, by Ilan Pape here, who has described for us the country and the world, the reality. Normal Finkelstein, of course, have done the same with luxury of detail. Noam Chomsky have done the same with luxury of detail. And those are books and knowledge, political knowledge, that we should learn in high school on, from high school on, and that I will make sure for that to happen. We don't have problems, or I don't have problem with the rich people and super rich people, as long as they don't create elites that control Hollywood. And you know that Hollywood is controlled by the Department of Defense, which approves or disapproves any movie that you see as entertainment. But it's nothing that to put on you with not only subliminal messages, that has been more than confirmed. This is not a conspiracy theory, this is a conspiracy fact. MKUltra existed too, so etc. We can talk about a lot of stuff that has to do with our politicians, and they're turning their backs on us. That's what they do. One of those cases is not only Chrystia Freeland, beginning with the Prime Minister of Canada, who lies with like a pathological lie, the same with the governments of the United States, the same with Chrystia Freeland, the same in the European Union. All of them, very few, like Ireland, have, and a few in the UK, senators or members of the parliament that speak out what's going on, as you saw in my last program, the last video, for example, and many others that you have seen, Friends of the World's Whale Project, and React today. Okay, let's get to it. Why am I happy that everything that I have said in this program, especially for the last 4 years, but always, I anticipated what's going on right here, and I asked Jeffrey Sachs a year ago about South America. I did the same with George Mearsheimer, etc., because the United States is going to go to Colombia. You know that the president of Colombia broke political relationships with Israel because of the genocide, and that was clear. I love that attitude, based, of course, in the denunciation that South Africa did in front of the International Court of Justice and the International Crime Court that has taken measures against Benjamin Netanyahu. But, of course, Mrs. van der Leyen protect, of course, like the Western world, a genocidal government, a genocidal person, and of course, as we're going to see, in the words of Norman Finkelstein, who read for us the magazine Time, which 51% in the beginning of the Israeli people were for what Benjamin Netanyahu was doing in Palestine. We see soldiers getting naked in Palestinian beaches nowadays, saying this is Palestine beach, and look at me. So when you see all this happening without repercussion and with total impunity, and you see, I'm talking about a genocide. A genocide. I mean, I don't go with the numbers that the Palestinian state gathers. I go with the numbers that Lancet, even though I lost and millions of people lost trust in the Lancet, which for centuries, more than a century, I believe, or almost a century, has been one of the, if not one of the most trusted medical magazines in the world. Trusted because doctors were real doctors and they were based on experimentation and results. And everything that has to do with the scientific method, not according to John Locke, but in the 21st century, in order to find out what are the conditions for us to continue on the world to live with liberty and freedom, not only on our body decisions when it comes to drugs and administration of drugs and vaccines, etc., but also to find out what are the needs of the population. But if we don't have this capacity to be really democratic, to have sovereignty, because sovereignty only exists if the people is sovereign in their countries. But if I don't have the right, like you have seen, from 4 million viewers to 17 or none here in YouTube, this is disastrous. And the C11, Bill C18, Bill C63 can send me to jail. I said that last time, etc. So there's no freedom. Canada's responsibility on what is going on. That is the point. So thank you for proving me right. And this is exactly what I was talking about in my public discourses 3 years ago. When I asked and demanded punishment, I mean legal punishment, according to international law and according to Canadian Constitution and the Bill of Rights and Freedoms, from the Prime Minister down in the issue of the pandemic, and who paid that money, where did that money go, how much we pay for the vaccine, all this that is supposed to be of public concern, because it is, and the cost of all these issues. What were the interests of the pharmaceuticals on this? How the CEO of Pfizer, Mr. Burla, were sent somebody else, Mrs. Small, to give declarations in front of the questioning that was occurring in Europe and in those days, when she said, we didn't know what was going on. We just sent the vaccine out without the proper procedure because we didn't know. You have seen all that. Dr. Kelly Victory, Dr. Robert Malone, etc. I think if you follow my program from 3 years ago, you will find out. So now the disaster is that Canada has breaking all the moral grounds with Mr. Christian Freeman and his plutocrats, with the new reset from the elites of the world, with the Israel lobby, which controls the United States and Canada, and that's what we need to find out. How long, how far does the rabbit hole in the influence of the Israel lobby in Canada is, because it's all around the world. And why anti-Semitism still exists as an excuse to destroy lives, like in the vaccine. If you don't put the vaccine, you don't have to study. You cannot study. Even if it's online, you cannot study. Who came with this kind of oppressive attitude, if not the Israeli lobby? And now, guys, you might say this is all fantasy. This is all made up by you. You're anti-Semitic. I'm anti-genocide. If that makes me anti-Semitic, so I'm anti-genocide. If that makes me anti-Semitic, I say it again, I'm anti-genocide. But the other part is that by the end of this year of genocide, 3 months before the year, 91% or more than 90%, 91 if I'm showing the data, of the Jewish people, the civilians, after spitting on priests, after spitting on monks, after spitting on other religions in Jerusalem, as you have seen in my videos, I'm not making this up. They come now and dictate policy in Canada. Is it true? Am I just making this up? All these years that I have discovered for you and tell you what is the truth about this influence, pernicious influence that Israel has all over the world, not only beginning with the religion but changing history, and the burning of books that describes anything that had to do with American history, and the influence of this satanic, demonic organization that protects Israel, which is the United States, European Union, because to kill women and children, burn people alive, and blow them into pieces, looking for one guy that every soldier in the world that have served in the army of any part in the world knows that's why special operations exist. You don't need more than 20 or 30 people to cover an area like that to kill one guy. You go send special forces, people equipped, cover themselves, go do the operation, make the hit, and leave. You don't need to destroy hundreds of thousands of people or hundreds of people to destroy just one man. But just what that is the directive of the demented view of the state of Israel that kills people since 1947, developing technologies to do so in their cell phones like Pegasus that came to the state of Colombia to spy the president of Colombia, that now the United States is saying that they take responsibility for that intromission because it was not an intromission, it was the United States decision to buy the Pegasus malware. It's a virus that enters your phone, enters your everything. Everybody knows about Pegasus. We have talked about it many times in years past. But it's a virus that geo-positioned you, spies your talks, your conversations, your texts. Even if you think your phone is off, it's on. Records your conversations, your positioning, where are you going, etc. That's Pegasus. And they use it, and they only say that they sell it for governments and nobody else. But we all know that Israel is all, and NSO is all for money, man. I will be sure that Facebook, Google, and all these super rich people have Pegasus as a service. And not only that, I'm pretty sure they have Zeus also, and the old one that started all this to begin with, that I reported many years ago in the first decade, I believe, in 2018. Stuxnet, of course. We're going to see today, and I insist on this, how I'm being proven right. Again and again and again by things that I anticipated. If I see this as a citizen, why our politicians are not capable to see it? It's like the wildfires all around the world, here in Canada and everywhere. Even the fire department, Darian BC said last year, this is not logical, this is not natural. Not in 100 years we have seen these kind of fires. So I think we are being terraformed with our eyes wide open. I have a little accident, so I have issues with my right hand right now. But yeah, all these issues that we need to find the truth about, we are denied. And for asking these questions, YouTube censors me, like they censor everything that has to do with Palestine and or against Israel, which is a genocidal country. And why do I say that? Because 7 lawyers have begun a lawsuit against the Canadian government with all due reason. And that is because a document that I already read for you, but I want you to remember, is a document that based all this disaster that none of the countries around the world, after 2 destructive world wars, have learned anything about it. And that is not the peoples. The people suffer. You know, if there's somebody that wants to stop the bleeding, it's the soldier, because it is the soldier in the front lines who have to suffer and feel the deep wounds and scars that were left behind him. People come home to commit suicide, to kill their families, to kill themselves. They cannot have normal lives in the streets. You can see veterans of the Iraq War, for example, of the Gulf War, doing drugs, lost their lives. Why will that happen? Because the plutocrats want a new reset, disregarding our Lord, but electing the Barabbases who represent this bull, which is the Old Testament belief, that only Israel has the right to live according to Genesis 12, which is a total fallacy. I repeat again, is totally destituted of that right very soon. Even when Moses came down with the Ten Commandments, they already were adoring that guy, the bull. It's the same here. They're up for the gold. And one of the issues that as I have been mentioning this since the beginning of this event, and before, because I remember that 3 years ago we spoke about this matter and how come Palestine and Lebanese people didn't enjoy the resources that they have. Well, now Benjamin Netanyahu is saying we have railroads, we have beach houses for the people. We're going to create oil pipes, oil lines, pipelines in order to take the oil from the Palestinians, the oil from Lebanon for us. Oh, but there's not ours. Who cares? We have America, we have the European Union, we have the UK, we have New Zealand, we have Australia, we have Canada, man. Jesus, and the Nordics now with the Hollanders. And you know what? As you're going to see in the next few minutes, even the peoples in those countries recognize that I am right in my predictions. And not only that, they're acting upon it.
Wat er vannacht in Amsterdam is gebeurd en de beelden en de berichten die we daaruit horen zijn ronduit schandalig en verwerpelijk. En ik denk dat ook alles in het werk moet worden gesteld om de daders op te sporen en te vervolgen. Dit is gewoon antisemitisch geweld.
הדבר השלישי זה כמובן להתארגן לאפשרויות אחרות. יש משחקי כדורגל אחרים באירופה, כדורסל ואירועים אחרים שצריך לחשוב עליהם. אני הנחיתי את ראש המוסד וגורמים אחרים להכין את דרכי הפעולה שלנו וההתראה שלנו וההתארגנות שלנו למצב חדש.
Amsterdam kijkt terug op een gitzwarte nacht. En ook vandaag is het nog donker. Haatdragende, antisemitische relschoppers en criminelen hebben gisteravond en gisternacht Joodse Israëlische bezoekers te gast in onze stad belaagd en in elkaar geslagen. Mijn hart gaat uit naar de slachtoffers, naar hun familie, hier en in Israël. Jongens op scooters gingen kriskras door de stad, op zoek naar supporters van Maccabi Tel Aviv. Het was hit and run. Voetbalfans werden geslagen en geschopt, waarna de relschoppers er weer snel vandoor gingen, vluchtend voor de politiemacht die gisteren massaal op de been was.
מספר שכל מקום ערבו שם מוסלמים עם מלות, עם זיקוקים, עם דקירות, הם תפסו אנשים וכאילו כמו ניסו לחטוף אותם אפילו, שזה היה פחד אלוהים, הם הצליחו לרוץ מהר וברחו למלון למעלה. עד עכשיו הם סגורים במלון, הם מפחדים לצאת מהחדר. הם כולם, כל החמישה ביחד, מפחדים לצאת מהחדר.
Why? Because of this.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
I'm going to read for you again. Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, approved and proposed for signature and ratification or accession by General Assembly Resolution 260A-3 of 9 December 1948, entry into force 12 January 1951 in accordance with Article 13. The contracting parties, having considered the declaration made by the General Assembly of the United Nations in its Resolutions 96-1, dated 11 December 1946, that genocide is a crime under the international law contrary to the spirit and aims of the United Nations, which is being attacked by Israel for the last year, no problem, and condemned by the civilized world. Oh, apparently now to be civilized is to destroy Iraq, Syria, Yemen, before the intervention of Yemen a year ago. Syria, all these 7 countries they wanted to take, according to General James Clark that I have shown for you, to you guys, in years past. Okay, having considered the declaration made by the General Assembly of the United Nations in its Resolution 96-1, recognizing that all periods of history genocide has inflicted great losses on humanity, and being convinced that in order to liberate mankind from such an odious scourge, international cooperation is required. First of all, international cooperation is required. It's the United States, it's Canada, it's the United Kingdom, it's the European Union, it's Australia, it's New Zealand, it's the Nordic countries. Contracting parties in this genocide? What do you think? They are. Article 1. Hereby being convinced that in order to liberate mankind from such an odious scourge, international cooperation is required, hereby agree as hereinafter provided. Article 1. The contracting parties confirm that genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law which they undertake to prevent and to punish. Article 2. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to the members of this group. What do you think is happening in Gaza and Lebanon right now? C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. If you heard their last program, Israel is permitting 30 trucks to enter whole Gaza. Oh, but today in this morning news, no, they're going to let some more trucks come in. And who's supporting all this? Your country? My country? Yes. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, all that happening in the hospitals in Israel. Shooting kids in the head and in the stomach. Not me saying it, it's the rapporteur for the United Nations. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. They separate their families. Article 3. The following acts shall be punishable. A. Genocide. B. Conspiracy to commit genocide, which is all Israel, the United States, Canada, and all whom are supporting this. Genocide in Palestine and Lebanon, and anywhere else, because you remember that they kill Canadians, Americans, Europeans. It doesn't matter, as long as if they're in Gaza, you can be killed. Journalists, United Nations members, more than 200 United Nations members, and servicemen. Genocide, A. Genocide. B. Conspiracy to commit genocide. C. Direct and public incitement to commit genocide. That is said already by the first days, and still thus is being said by the Jewish state. I correct here, the Zionist state of Israel, or the state of Israel, as we understand. Direct and public incitement to commit genocide. You can see the people speaking at us Christians, are priests there, are monks there. I already said that, but not only that, attacking the students in the United States, in Canada, with the flag of Israel. And as you have seen in videos before, they are very aggressive, and I have to exert the right to defend myself if I've been attacked by one of those guys, or many of those guys. You have to, here in Canada, there in Europe, in every place in the world, United States, to defend yourselves too. Don't forget about that. D. Attempt to commit genocide. This is not only an attempt, it's already in progress. And E. Complicity in genocide, whether it's with Canada, United States, European Union, New Zealand, Australia, with the mainstream media. Of course, as you can see there, Israeli kills and the media justifies. BBC, CNN, CBC, and Sky News, you name it, are complicit in this genocide, and very much so. Article 4. Persons committing genocide or any of the other acts enumerated in Article 3 shall be punished. That means Israeli soldiers, civilians, Canadian Jews, or Zionist Jews that go to kill innocent people and destroy families and commit crimes against humanity, and barbaric crimes that not even Barabbas committed, even though they replaced Barabbas by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and Freedoms here in Canada. They're in New Zealand, they're in Australia, they're in the European Union, and they're in the UK. Persons committing genocide or any of the other acts enumerated in Article 3 shall be punished. Persons, individuals, that is the 91% or the 51% or the whatever percent of people that supported this genocide in the state of Israel. It was 90% according to the last statistics, 51% when the war began, according to the Times, which was cited by Norman Finkelstein, somebody said, okay, whatever. Article 5. So that means that if we're talking about the persons, we're talking about a whole nation here that supports genocide and spits on other people. That is, and you have seen the other day, there's thousands of people that want to take the Palestinian land. This woman saying that in public for the Jewish people. There's thousands of people. And you have seen Jared Kushner say, no, we have already made a video about that. You guys have to follow my program, reproduce the program, give it a like, support the program, make it known, because YouTube is after me, man. And not only that, everybody that goes for genocide. But we are way more, guys, so we have to unite. The problem is that with the representatives that we have, and the intelligence services and the police services that we have, we're going to be persecuted. Bill C-63. Article 5. The contracting parties undertake to enact in accordance with their respective constitutions. The contracting parties, which are 190 countries or so, undertake to enact in accordance with their respective constitutions the necessary legislations to give effect to the provisions of the present convention, and in particular to provide effective penalties for persons guilty of genocide or any of other acts enumerated in the Article 3. Article 6. Persons charged with genocide or any of the other acts enumerated in Article 3 shall be tried by a competent tribunal of the state in the territory of which the act was committed, or by such international penal tribunal as may have jurisdiction with respect to those contracting parties which shall have accepted its jurisdiction, in this case the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, for which the United States, very conveniently, which is supporting and accompanying this genocide and is accomplished on this matter with Europe, etc., are part of. Article 7. Genocide and the other acts enumerated in Article 3 shall not be considered as political crimes for the purpose of extradition. The contracted parties pledge themselves in such cases to grant extradition in accordance with their laws and treaties in force. Article 8. Any contracting party may call upon the competent organs of the United Nations to take such action under the Charter of the United Nations that the Jews destroy in front of you and I in the United Nations, laughing at us like to the floor, laughing at us, the rest of the world, and our politicians quiet, accomplishing. What is the favors they're receiving from these people? That's what we need to find out. Any contracting party may call upon the competent organs of the United Nations to take such action to Israelis killing United Nations soldiers, attacking United Nations posts in Lebanon, to take such action under the Charter of the United Nations as they consider appropriate for the prevention and suppression of acts of genocide or any of the other acts enumerated in Article 3. The point is that we don't see, because if it wasn't for the martyrs of Al Jazeera, the martyrs of Palestine, the martyrs of Lebanon right now, that are giving their lives to give us information, we wouldn't have seen in direct, live, these atrocities committed, these genocide committees, and understand what a genocide is, and that happened with the Indians, the First Nations. I mean, the Indians in Europe, sure, with the British, but the First Nations in the case of Canada, and the United States, and Central and South America by the European conquerors, etc. Article 9. Disputes between the contracting parties relating to the interpretation, application, or fulfillment of the present convention, including those relating to the responsibility of the state for a genocide or for any of the other acts enumerated in Article 3, shall be submitted to the International Court of Justice at the request of any of the parties of the dispute. In this case, South Africa was not party of the dispute, but it was party of the United Nations, and as such did it. Article 10. The present convention, of which the Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish texts are equally authentic, shall bear the date of 9 December 1949. Okay, I repeat. Article 10. The present convention, of which the Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish texts are equally authentic, shall bear the date of 9 December 1948. The present convention, on which the Chinese, English, Article 11. The present convention shall be open until 31 December 1949 for signature on behalf of any member of the United Nations and of any non-member state to which an invitation to sign has been addressed by the General Assembly. You can go and read the rest. But we're going to stick on this for now. Why? Because what I was just telling you, that I have anticipated in 2020 and my public discourses. So let's take a look.
What's up? Morning. Hello, everyone. I
think you know who I am. I'm glad to be in Canada, invited here by a coalition of diverse groups, including Palestinian, Jewish, Muslim, group of faith, academics, students, and community groups. In a year in which I was turned into a reluctant chronicler of genocide, I feel compelled to recognize and acknowledge the victims of all genocides, past and present. And in this spirit, I feel compelled to pay tribute to the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the unceded land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. As a visitor to this country and as someone who was born and raised on a continent from which colonialism and its most insidious form, settler colonialism, originated as a way to subjugate and depredate the natives, I recognize the profound injustices endured by the indigenous people in this country and in other places around the world, like in Palestine. It is not lost on me that despite the urgency of the current moment, with a few important exceptions, the political leadership in this country chose to either not meet me or withdraw invitations to meet me. Meanwhile, it is with such a honor that I know that the original custodians of this land are making plans to fly from all over the country, across the country, to meet with me and discuss what is happening in Palestine. And it is also the young people, as well as a fair number from among my peers, who have fought to have me speak and packed out venues. It would seem my words, my candid readings of facts, international law, and justice, and my insistence on speaking honestly about the genocide that is unfolding in Gaza and the serious risk that it spreads throughout the region scare the political class and those who hold power, including economic and financial power, which we know from Edward Said to Antonio Gramsci. The holding power also determines cultural hegemony. It is clear to me that the Canadian people want more clarity, integrity, and concrete action from their government on the atrocities we all see unfolding in Palestine. In Gaza, we are forced to watch as Israel's constant bombing, sniper, and artillery fire continues to spare no one. Journalists, doctors, students, scholars, nurses, persons with disability, people seeking food and safety, humanitarian workers, including UN staff, including in the so-called humanitarian zones. Conservative figures indicate that the Israeli assault on Gaza has killed, injured, and maimed or buried under the rubble at least 155,000 Palestinians. Entire families exterminated, and 70% of the 45,000 ascertained killed are women and children. 700 of those killed among the 17,000 children were babies. Gaza is now a wasteland of rubble, garbage, and human remains where survivors hold on to life amid widespread deprivation and disease. The Palestinians trapped there have experienced a level of violence not seen anywhere in this century. They have nothing to return to, and all of this is by design. And still, Israel intensifies its onslaught as we speak. Meanwhile, the violence is metastasizing to the West Bank, where clear patterns are replicating from Gaza. Since October 7 last year, the rate at which Palestinians have been killed has increased tenfold on the previous 20-year average, including 169 children, a fifth of all Palestinian children Israel has executed since the year 2000. Palestinian academics, human rights defenders, scholars, doctors, nurses, children have arbitrarily swept up, incarcerated in a campaign of mass arrest, now facing deprivation, torture in squalid conditions without charge or trial. Thousands have been displaced in the largest land grab in 30 years in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And as I have continued to investigate, document, and call for action on genocide, it has been clear to me that there is also a denialism, an obscurantism that hides behind a common perception of what is genocide that has been clearly shaped by the massive horror of the Holocaust and probably the features of the Rwandan genocide. In both cases, the almost industrialized size, scale, and brutality of the extermination has been definitive of our collective understanding of the crime. But I remind you, genocide is not defined by personal opinions or particular histories. You can have genocide without mass killing and extermination, and still, in Palestine, we have this as well. The colonial amnesia of most Western states has led us to forget the hundreds of millions of people who have been genocided from Namibia, Australia, the Americas, and here, Turtle Island. Memory of the past is what will allow the future to be different, and this is why today knowledge is subversive. The crime of genocide consists of acts accompanied by the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. While destruction of the group is interpreted in physical or biological terms, case law derives intent from acts targeting the very foundation of the group, including the destruction of the spirit, the will to live, and of life itself. So when assessing intent, especially state intent to destroy a group, we must remember that genocide is a process, not a single act, including a plurality of acts and actors. So key is to identify the thread of intent that runs through this collective conduct. So in line with existing jurisprudence, my latest report assesses Israel's intent to destroy the Palestinian people holistically through a triple lens approach, considering the totality of Israeli conduct and crimes against the totality of the Palestinian people as such, across the totality of the Palestinian territory unlawfully occupied by Israel. And why do I insist on this framing? Let me explain you why. Because the Palestinians have been suffering war crimes and crimes against humanity for decades, but these alone do not expose the scale of the crime, nor illuminate the serious risk of erasure that they are facing. I'm far from alone in my assessment. By November last year, 30 independent UN experts had raised the alarm of genocide and on no less than 3 occasions. By January, the International Court of Justice had identified a plausible risk of irreparable harm to Palestinian rights under the Genocide Convention and has now indicated this provisional measures at least 3 times. In July, the same court handed down a watershed advisory opinion explicitly recognizing the occupation as unlawful in its entirety and emphasized the obligation of states not to recognize the occupation as legal, nor render aid or assistance to maintaining Israel's unlawful presence. And its full implementation is an imperative for Canada as well. Canada has clear obligations under international law toward the Palestinian people. Arms export license must be cancelled, all of them. Transparency on third states and direct transfers is an imperative. The free trade agreement with Israel should be under urgent review. Palestinian refugees and forcibly displaced persons must be accepted and given proper and urgent protection. Palestinian and Muslim humanitarian organizations must be allowed to do their urgent work without the undue scrutiny because of their religion, because this is discriminatory. We have to speak accurately and coherently in calling this for what it is, a genocide, unlawful occupation, apartheid, and acting accordingly. Thank you.
Madame Albanese, bonjour. Christian Noël de Radio-Canada. Dans le rapport, corrigez-moi si j'ai mal lu, vous demandez au Canada de revoir toute forme de collaboration avec Israël, militaire, économique, politique. Est-ce que vous demandez au gouvernement aussi de cesser ces collaborations?
En fait, ce n'est pas moi qui le demande, c'est le droit international qui l'exige. Parce que, comme je faisais référence à la décision de la Cour de justice internationale du 19 juillet 2024, ça découle des obligations de tout État membre des Nations Unies de se conformer au droit international. Quand il y a des violations du droit international autant sérieuses comme celle-là que franchement Israël déjà mettait en œuvre ou commettait avant le 7 octobre, il faut ne pas reconnaître comme légales les conséquences de cette illégalité et cesser toute forme d'assistance, soutien, coopération avec l'entreprise illégale ou l'acte illégal, la conduite illégale, et s'opérer, travailler jusqu'à aboutir à la cessation de ce qui est légal. C'est pour ça que le Canada doit tout revoir et ce qui est jugé dangereux pour le droit des Palestiniens doit être suspendu immédiatement. Mais surtout, le transfert de armes, ça découle d'un ordre obligatoire contraignant de la Cour de justice internationale du 26 janvier. On risque d'être complice dans des actes de génocide, crimes de guerre et crimes contre l'humanité.
Est-ce que vous avez remarqué que le Canada continue d'exporter de l'armement militaire ou de l'équipement militaire à Israël, malgré ce que dit la loi internationale?
Oui, et les Canadiens l'ont remarqué? Oui.
Pouvez-vous me donner des détails?
Je ne peux pas vous donner des détails parce que c'est pas que je suis en train d'investiguer la conduite de tout État membre, mais ça me semble assez objectif que le Canada a dit d'avoir suspendu tout transfert depuis le 26 janvier, mais pas ce qui était déjà ce qui était déjà opérationnel. L'autre chose que je ne sais pas si c'est le cas ou pas, mais il y a beaucoup de Canadiens qui ont cette crainte, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de transparence sur les transferts indirects, les transferts potentiels indirects d'armement ou d'autres équipements qui puissent endommager les Palestiniens sur place, mais même les Israéliens, parce que franchement, la situation dont on parle est un désastre catastrophique, soit pour les Palestiniens que pour les Israéliens. Et là, le fait que le gouvernement n'assure pas la transparence, c'est quand même problématique, je trouve, en tant que visiteur étranger.
With few exceptions, political leadership in Canada has either chosen not to meet with you or withdrawn invitations to you. Can you name names of government officials like Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, for example? Did you try to reach out to meet with her? Did she say no? Can you just be more specific about that?
Yeah, I was supposed to have a meeting with the Foreign Committee and with the minister, and it's not going to take place. And what I think is that it's happening because of the pressure from pro-Israel lobby groups who are very vocal, very virulent, very aggressive. What are they fearing? What are they fearing? I'm telling you the truth. I'm just speaking facts and international law. And all the talks I've had here from Montreal and in various universities and other public encounters have been incredibly powerful because they are a moment of collective grief. But there is a space for everyone to be heard and acknowledged, and clearly there is no discrimination whatsoever against anyone. But this is exactly this is why they don't want my events hosting me to take place, because it puts them in front of a mirror.
So just to be clear, you were supposed to have a meeting with Melanie Joly, but that was canceled, and you think it's because of the pro-Israel group's pressure?
I cannot tell you what are the causes behind the withdrawal of the invitations and agreement to have meetings. I only know that I base myself on facts. It happened after pro-Israel groups and pro-Israel individuals started to accuse my persona, my mandate of the usual, and I won't repeat the accusations because they are extremely defamatory, but this is what I think poisoned the atmosphere in Canada. It's a choice not to meet with a UN independent expert and in the country. Sad and true, unfortunately.
Are any government officials meeting you?
Not that I know of. Things might change, but I'm looking at my team and nothing has changed. But I'm meeting with parliamentarians. And as I said, I'm meeting with the traditional custodians of the land, which is a nice way to be welcome officially in this country.
Quel message s'envoie, ça?
Pardon?
Quel message s'envoie qu'aucun membre du gouvernement Trudeau accepte de vous rencontrer à propos de ça?
C'est leur choix. Aucun message. Mes messages sont Pourquoi vous me regardez comme ça? Quel message on ne peut pas forcer quelqu'un qui n'a pas l'intérêt à vous rencontrer. Ça va. De toutes les façons, le message est clair. C'est pas qu'il ne les rejoint pas, je pense. Parce que de toutes les façons, je rencontrais plusieurs journalistes, médias, le message voyage très clair. Je ne demande pas de la charité de la part du gouvernement. Je leur demande de respecter le droit international et de contribuer à avancer la justice, surtout dans un pays comme le Canada qui se dit prêt à reconnaître les problèmes de son passé, un pays qui a une histoire coloniale en train de se explorer pour corriger son héritage. On ne peut pas garder cette proximité avec un État qui aujourd'hui continue à pratiquer un colonialisme de dépeuplement envers le peuple palestinien. On s'attend mieux, on s'attend plus de cohérence, tout en ajoutant les obligations du droit international que le Canada est en train de ne pas observer. Le pauvre, il est là depuis quelques... Sorry. Go ahead.
Good morning, Brian Passy from Toronto Sun. Thanks so much for allowing us to ask questions today. Your past comments on Israel and the war have been garnered some criticism with nations like Germany and France declaring your comments as anti-Semitic. With that in mind, you talk to me, are you able to acknowledge the role that Hamas has in this current conflict?
Of course, I've always done. I mean, there is no question whatsoever about that. Let me be clear. I've said on October 7 and since then that the crimes that have been committed against Israeli civilians had to be investigated and punished. No question about that. I have condemned the crimes against Israeli civilians, the killing, brutalization, and the taking of hostages. And with the same rigor and with the same firm spirit, I have condemned the crimes that Israel has committed against the Palestinian people before, on, and after October 7, including what now looks like a genocide. Israel has capitalized on the rage, fury, and the extreme pain of the Israelis, turning them into many soldiers into willful executioner of an extermination plan. Now, let's go to the states you mentioned who have accused me are the United States and Germany and France, states who are clearly involved and supporting in what Israel is doing. It speaks to their record, not mine. Because frankly, not only I am supported my mandate has been supported and protected by Jewish people, organizations, and scholars since the very beginning, just to clear the record. But this is not, my statements are not against the Jewish people or even the Israelis. My assessment is on the performance of the Israeli government. It could be led by Buddhists, Muslim, Christians, atheists. It wouldn't change. The problem is not the state of Israel. The problem is, or its existence. The problem is the fact that Israel practices apartheid against the Palestinian people, continues to maintain an unlawful occupation that is the vehicle to take the land, to expropriate the resources, and to erase the Palestinians. And in order to enforce that plan, it's now also committing a genocide. Genocide is a means to an end. Israel has seized the opportunity to continue what it has been doing since even before its existence, taking the land of historical Palestine without the Palestinians. And it's not even me. Listen to what they say. They're ministers, they're parliamentarians, they're settlers. And by the way, there are Canadian individuals involved in this, in the settlements, and probably also fighting in Israel. So this is upon you to know and correct. Yes.
In Montreal, you expressed some shock at Quebec opening up a trade office in Tel Aviv. Raised a few eyebrows because Tel Aviv isn't among the many disputed land in Israel. Do you believe that Israel has a right to exist?
Israel does exist. Israel is a recognized member of the United Nations. Besides this, there is not such a thing in international law like a right of a state to exist. Does Italy has a right to exist? Italy exists. Now, if tomorrow Italy and France want to merge and become Ita-France, fine, this is not up to us. What is enshrined in international law is the right of a people to exist. So the state is there, the state of Israel is there, is protected as a member of the United Nations. Does this justify the erasure of another people? Hell no. Not 75 years ago, not 57 years ago, surely not today. Where is the protection of the Palestinian people from erasure, from annexation, from illegal occupation and apartheid? This is what we need to discuss. Yes.
Ok. Est-ce que le manque de transparence que vous avez évoqué, le manque de transparence du gouvernement fédéral canadien, serait l'équivalent comme... Est-ce que ça rendrait le Canada complice du génocide?
Non, je ne peux pas répondre à ça parce qu'en fait, la complicité... Bon, le génocide, pour déterminer le génocide, on va regarder les actes et surtout l'intention de détruire un groupe à travers les actes génocidaires, des actes criminels. Et moi, j'ai articulé comment on ne peut pas ne pas voir l'intention génocidaire, comme je vous le disais. On doit regarder tous les crimes. Et qu'est-ce qui lie tous les crimes? On doit lier tous les crimes aux intentions, même aux documents qui ont été circulés en justifiant ces crimes. On doit regarder comment tous les Palestiniens, de n'importe où, de Gaza, de Jérusalem-Est et de Cisjordanie, ont été ciblés dans tout le territoire. Et le territoire est ciblé pour annexion. Mais ceci dit, je trouve qu'il y a sûrement des violations de la loi sur la responsabilité des États vis-à-vis Israël. Le Canada est en train de soutenir un État qui commet des crimes. De là à dire qu'il est complice dans le génocide, non, je ne peux pas. Et ça, c'est quelque chose qui, je pense, ça devrait être éventuellement investigué au niveau local.
Un suivi très rapidement. J'aimerais savoir si le Canada fait ce que vous dites, l'audit notamment des faits qu'il a et des affaires qu'il a avec Israël. Si le Canada fait ça, est-ce que ça amènerait une solution humanitaire, ça débloquerait quelque chose entre Israël et la Palestine? Qu'est-ce que ça débloquerait?
Et en fait, c'est une bonne question, mais ça me pousse à dire les conséquences de nos actions doivent être mesurées dans un contexte plus large où il y a aussi les conséquences des actions des autres États. C'est clair, si le Canada est seul à poursuivre ce chemin de justice et de conformité au droit international et tous les autres restent dans la justice comme aujourd'hui, peut-être rien ne va changer. Mais je pense que quand il y a le principe pour le principe, et si tout le monde répondait aux principes au lieu qu'aux intérêts politiques, économiques, et franchement, en déployant un discret niveau de discrimination, parce qu'on discrimine entre les victimes, entre la vie des uns et des autres, là on serait dans un chemin différent. Regardez l'Afrique du Sud. L'Afrique du Sud était seule à initier cette action envers Israël pour violation de la Convention du génocide. Même d'autres pays africains ont hésité à le suivre, mais l'a fait pour une question de principe. Et le Canada a une histoire de marcher dans l'histoire pour le droit. J'ai appris que en fait, je savais que le Canada avait été critique de l'apartheid en Afrique du Sud, mais en fait, ça démarrait du Québec. Avant beaucoup d'autres États. Et aussi, le Canada a su se détacher de l'influence des États-Unis quand il s'agissait de prendre une position sur la guerre en Irak. Le Canada a imposé des sanctions à la Russie pour son agression contre l'Ukraine et au Myanmar. Le Canada est intervenu auprès de la Cour de justice internationale dans le cas du génocide pour mieux considérer l'intention génocidaire dans le cas du Myanmar. Pourquoi il ne le fait pas dans le cas de la Palestine? Quelles sont les pressions et les intérêts qui empêche le Canada d'être cohérent avec son histoire et le droit international.
About the two-state solution, the Foreign Affairs Committee here is studying what they call the quickest path to recognize a Palestinian state by the government of Canada. Do you think that is a useful exercise? Could it lead to peace if Canada does so?
I beg your pardon, but I am not comfortable with language like useful exercise while there is and imagining government officials or parliamentarians entertaining themselves in useful exercise when there is a genocide ongoing. The priority is to stop the genocide. If the government here, the parliamentarians want to call it ceasefire, call it pear and apple, call it the way you want, but this is the priority. The rest is secondary, which doesn't mean that the recognition of the state of Palestine is not important. My question is, if this country has entertained the discussions on the two-state solution, how come it has not recognized the state of Palestine yet? What is to be debated? So again, recognition of the state of Palestine shouldn't take time, should be automatic, should be an act of coherence. Otherwise, if you don't recognize it, it means that you shouldn't be talking about that at all. Why are you even a voice in the debate? It's about coherence. I know that what I'm saying is blunt, but we need to be blunt because the impunity that has been granted to Israel for decades has led to this, which is a disaster both for the Palestinians and the Israelis. And again, diplomatic talks has been turned into a place to justify the unimaginable, the illegal. So yes, the state of Palestine should be recognized. Let's move on. But the point, the question is not that. The question is self-determination. Even if you recognize the state of Palestine and it's merely a perfunctory act, what do you do to realize the right of self-determination of the Palestinians? Is Canada spending any of its political capital to make sure that the genocide ends as soon as possible, the ceasefire, whatever? But then there is already a deadline set for the end of the occupation. The ICJ has passed an advisory opinion which declares the occupation unlawful and to be dismantled unconditionally and totally as rapidly as possible. And that as rapid as possible has been defined by the General Assembly. It must happen by September next year. What is Canada doing to ensure that the occupation is dismantled? And then, more than this, there is apartheid. I know that in this country you feel uncomfortable with the word apartheid, but you have to tell me why. Because I, together with Israeli human rights organizations, Palestinian human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Harvard University, and thousands of Israelis, talk about apartheid and give you the evidence of it. And here, like in other parts in North America, I hear, we cannot say that word. It's your problem. Again, international law is so clear that doesn't allow you to find excuses. So, however, end of the genocide, end of the occupation, end of the apartheid. This is what it means applying international law and helping build peace for Palestinians and Israelis and anyone who calls that land home.
Je comprends bien et je ne veux pas vous mettre des mots dans la bouche, c'est pour cette raison-là que je vous le demande. Est-ce que vous en appelez au Canada à reconnaître que c'est un génocide et si c'est le cas, quelle devrait être sa première action par la suite?
Alors, tout d'abord, je pense que le Canada ne peut pas ne pas assumer que la Cour de justice internationale des Nations Unies, l'organisme judiciaire le plus important des Nations Unies, a reconnu depuis le mois de janvier la plausibilité du risque du génocide. C'est suffisant. Vous savez, on ne doit pas, pour respecter la Convention sur le génocide, on ne doit même pas attendre que le génocide se passe. On a une obligation de prévenir, d'arrêter et de punir le génocide. Alors, le moment où il y a ce risque, tous les pays sont appelés à faire en mesure que le génocide ne se passe pas. Qu'est-ce que le Canada a fait?
Vous demandez au Canada de le faire maintenant.
Oui, je demande au Canada de prendre conscience et de prendre des mesures visant à empêcher que des actes de génocide soient commis en Palestine. Pour moi, ce sont déjà ont été déjà commis. Le Canada doit prendre des mesures, même s'il ne veut pas écouter la relatrice spéciale des Nations Unies sur la Palestine et d'autres 30 relateurs spéciaux, d'autres experts indépendants des Nations Unies, et les historiens israéliens qui ont dénoncé le génocide, Omer Bartov, Amos Goldberg, Raz Sigal et des centaines d'experts légaux, ça va. Le Canada ne veut pas accepter ça, au moins qu'il se conforme aux mesures provisionnelles ordonnées par la Cour de justice internationale.
You alluded to this in French. I just want to ask again in English. But Canada promotes itself, this government especially, as a government that supports an international rules-based order. But you can look no further to the South Africa case at the ICJ, where the Prime Minister said they respect the court but not the ruling. Canada's inaction or lack of inaction. What do you think that says to our reputation that we hold dear here? That we are a country that respects the United Nations, respects international law. How does this event, what's happening in Israel and Palestine, speak to our beliefs?
I can tell you I think I made it clear in French and English what I think. I think that this is not coherent. There is a lot. Let's be very honest. You cannot say that you are in favor, you recognize the primacy of international law and then violate international law in the meantime. You cannot say that you recognize the primacy of the International Court of Justice and then you depart from the application of the principles that have been dictated by that court. There is incoherence, and that incoherence has a name, is lack of compliance. Now, how does this affect Canada's reputation? Look, I think that the world is much more articulated in its capacity of seeing and understanding also the nuances. First of all, something that, I live in an Arab country and I travel a lot across Arab countries, and there is so much admiration for the young people and the universities who have mobilized in this country in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And this includes, in this country, like in the United States, a substantive Jewish component. This is so important, so fundamental, because in a way, it's building a bridge that has been broken many decades ago between the Jewish people and the Arab people. This is immense. And so people differentiate the political level from the people in general. I also think that the media in this country as well, like not different from the rest of the West, have not been very diligent or led by ethical principles in reporting what was happening in Palestine before October 7, on October 7 and after. So probably there is large part of the Canadian people who don't even know what kind of inferno Gaza has been turned into. Women unable to find the basics, from running water, of course everyone, but as a woman, I would like people to empathize, to realize what it means having an entire family exterminated, not having hospitals anymore, all the universities destroyed, the 300 schools destroyed, all the UN buildings standing, 70% have been severely damaged and cannot be used. Gaza has been turned into rubble. Is it a war? No, it's not a war. Israel has predicated this genocide on the killing of terrorists, when the entire civilian population in Gaza has been qualified as terrorists, including the elderly, including the children, 17,000 children, that if I told you bunnies, there would be better reaction. But because they are Arab, we don't empathize. This speaks to our racists. And I say that as a European, I see that in us. And let's take this opportunity to do better, to recognize what doesn't work in our societies. And may this be the last genocide in history. This is where we are today. And Canada is still seen as part of the old settler colonial bloc. I'm sorry.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference. C'est ce qui conclut la conférence. Merci.
Merci à vous. Thank you.
Apart from that, the necessity for us, for the country, and for the world to understand that the other part of the story here is Russia. I know that there's many Canadians that still believe that, okay, we have the right to conquer and destroy, so we want the world. Yeah, but what they don't understand is that even with that thinking, these idiots are not understanding that the world doesn't work that way anymore, and there's forces that are going to confront you, bullies. When you think that way, that it's okay to kill and destroy and take others' resources because that's the way it is, and that's it. Don't forget about it. What you don't understand is that the lobbyists in Canada are bigger than you. And then when the moment comes, if you don't abide what they say, you are going to be targeted too. And that started 10 years ago when I published that book, In Gold We Trust, Our Path to Eternity, when I speak about truth. And truth, as in that book, the truth is explained as the truth is relative, the truth is revealed, and the truth is absolute. All right, we're not going to get into that. Being the 10 years of the publication, I'm going to make a whole program about it, or maybe more.
Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Ottawa, Canada on November 6, 2024. Today, I joined with 6 other lawyers from across the country to commence a lawsuit against the Government of Canada on behalf of 2 Palestinian Canadians who have lost dozens of members of their families in Gaza over the past year, and whose pleas for assistance and justice from the Canadian government have gone entirely unheeded for far too long. After filing our statement of claim in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice yesterday, we held a press conference here in Ottawa where I spoke along with my colleague Shane Martinez and with one of the plaintiffs, Hani El-Batigni, who gave a moving statement at the conclusion of our press conference. We then took some questions from the media. 2 members of our team were in Ottawa but were unable to attend the press conference. Those were Professor Faisal Baba of Osgoode Hall Law School at York University, and Yaver Hamid, an accomplished lawyer here in Ottawa who is in private practice. You'll hear from them at the end of the video of our press conference, which I'm about to share with you. In addition, there were 3 members of our team who were not in Ottawa today, and I want to mention them because their work has been invaluable to this entire project. Asaf Rashid, a criminal lawyer in Halifax, Juman El Asmar, an immigration lawyer in Edmonton, and Professor Emilio Dabed, a professor of law of Chilean-Palestinian origin who is traveling this week. I hope that the Canadian government will finally understand that citizens of conscience will take all lawful measures to bring an end to this genocide and to hold all those accountable who must and should be held to account. This is a historic lawsuit. We don't know how it's going to play out, but you can be sure that all 7 of these lawyers who are working on a pro bono basis will do the utmost to achieve justice at the end of the day. Good morning. My name is Dimitri Lascaris. I'm one of 7 lawyers in the Coalition for Canadian Accountability in Gaza. We represent 2 Palestinian Canadians, Hani El-Batigni and Tamer Jarada. Mr. Batnigi is here to my right today. On March 13th, 2024, our clients, who have lost dozens of family members to Israel's attacks on Gaza, announced their intention to pursue claims against Canada's government. Since then, the Canadian government has done nothing to address their pleas. Yesterday, we filed a civil claim on their behalf, seeking declarations from the Ontario Superior Court of Justice that Canada has failed to fulfill its duty to take all reasonable measures within its power to prevent genocide, and has violated the charter rights of our clients. For more than 1 year, the world has watched in horror as Israel has perpetrated a genocide in Gaza. Israeli munitions have burned Palestinian refugees alive. Israeli snipers have shot Palestinian children in the head while they were playing in or near their homes. Doctors have been forced to perform amputations on Palestinian children without anesthetic. Palestinian children have been crushed and trapped in collapsed buildings, targeted by Israel's Western-supplied bombs. Sometimes, no one was able to come to their rescue before they died an agonizing and lonely death. The official death toll for Palestinian children in Gaza now exceeds 16,000. The true number is certainly far higher. The number of Palestinian children who have been disabled, wounded, traumatized, or orphaned is far higher still. For more than 1 year, Israel has pursued a deliberate policy of depriving Palestinian children of food and water. Doctors in Gaza have revealed to the world images of emaciated babies on the verge of death. The casualty figures I've cited thus far do not come close to telling the full story. In July of this year, the prestigious medical journal The Lancet issued a report in which it estimated the true death toll in Gaza. As The Lancet explained, armed conflicts have indirect health implications beyond the direct harm from violence. Even if the conflict ends immediately, there will continue to be many indirect deaths in coming months and years. In recent conflicts, such indirect deaths range from 3 to 15 times the number of direct deaths. The Lancet applied a conservative estimate of 4 indirect deaths per 1 direct death to the 37,396 official deaths reported at that time, and thereby opined that 186,000 deaths could very well be attributable to Israel's war on Gaza. In a report issued on October 10th, the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory in Israel documented that Israel had perpetrated a concerted policy to destroy Gaza's healthcare system as part of a broader assault on Gaza. The Commission also investigated the treatment of Palestinian detainees in Israel and of Israeli victims since October 7th and concluded that Israel is responsible for torture and sexual and gender-based violence. There's more. Israel has repeatedly bombed UNRWA-operated schools where the displaced were sheltering. Israel has destroyed the universities of Gaza. Throughout this parade of horrors, Canada's support for Israel has not wavered. Although Justin Trudeau and Melanie Joly periodically express their grave concern for the plight of Palestinians, not once have they backed up their purported concern with real action. Canada has imposed no meaningful sanctions on Israeli political or military leaders. It continues to allow Canadian citizens to serve in Israel's military. It continues to permit Canadian-made military equipment to be delivered to Israel and even purchases deadly weapons from Israel. Canada also continues to accord trade benefits to Israeli businesses, including those situated in illegal West Bank settlements. Canada continues to accord charitable status to Canadian entities that funnel money to Israel or that are devoted to whitewashing Israel's crimes. On January 26th of this year, the International Court of Justice ruled that it was plausible that Israel is committing genocide within the meaning of the Genocide Convention. On that very day, Canada suspended funding for UNRWA, the main humanitarian agency operating in Gaza. It did so based on allegations by Israel, the perpetrator of this genocide, that a tiny number of lower-level UNRWA employees had participated in the October 7th attacks. Months later, belatedly, Canada restored its funding for UNRWA, but only after the international media revealed that Israel's allegations were not supported by even a shred of credible evidence. Canada has done nothing, emboldening Israel to be more brazen. Israel, in fact, has now designated every major human rights organization in Palestine as a terrorist entity. Today, the world sees clearly that when it comes to the suffering of Palestinians, our brothers and sisters in Palestine, Canada has no red line. There's no atrocity Israel can commit that would end Canada's support for Israel. Our clients and all Palestinian Canadians are in effect victims of Canada's anti-Palestinian racism. Confronted by so much pain and so much government indifference to their agony, our clients have decided to seek justice. As stated by former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Aided by a team of lawyers who are pursuing this litigation on a pro bono basis, Hani and Tamer, our clients, will shine a cleansing light on Canada's indefensible support for Israel's genocidal regime. Moreover, neither they nor their lawyers will cease until Canada has been held accountable. Even if Israel stopped its genocide tomorrow, this litigation will continue. We will not relent. We will not give Canada's government a free pass. I now invite my co-counsel, Shane Martinez, to address the legal nature of our client's claims. Shane is a lawyer with the Canadian branch of the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians, whose practice is focused on criminal and human rights law. And after my colleague has spoken, Hani will make a brief statement, and we will then take questions from the media.
Thank you and good morning. The case announced today marks an important milestone in holding Canada accountable for failing to take reasonable measures to prevent Israel's genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people. Canada refuses to uphold the rule of law where Israel's armed forces are concerned. This refusal to act, in combination with Canada's bolstering of Israel's military capabilities, has had devastating consequences for Palestinian Canadians, including our clients. These consequences have engaged two of the most important legal instruments, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Our claim alleges that Canada, by failing to fulfill its legal duty to take all reasonable measures to prevent the crime of genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza, did causally contribute to violations of our clients' rights under the Charter. I'll first share some background information on our clients. I'll then explain the importance of the Genocide Convention and the Charter, and then address the nexus between the two in this case. Our client, Hani al-Baghdadi, is a Canadian citizen and Palestinian Canadian born in Gaza. He escaped Gaza as a teenager in 1967 during the Israeli Army's raids. He later moved to Canada in 1989, residing here with his wife and children. On September 20th, 2023, Hani returned to Gaza for the first time. When Israel began bombing Gaza in early October 2023, Hani and his relatives fled from neighborhood to neighborhood, evading the attacks. They endured harrowing conditions and scarce resources. Despite multiple evacuation attempts coordinated through Global Affairs, Hani repeatedly faced setbacks and danger. After a near-fatal bombing injured him on November 6, he finally crossed into Egypt. Tragically, while in Cairo, he learned that several family members, including his niece and her young children, were killed in airstrikes. Hani later sought to bring surviving relatives to Canada under a special refugee program, but found himself ineligible due to his financial situation as a pensioner. Tamer Harada, a Palestinian Canadian from Calgary, moved to Canada in 2011, where he resides with his wife and two children. When Israel's attacks on Gaza began in October 2023, Mr. Harada was consumed with fear for his family's safety. Most of his relatives were sheltering in Gaza, but with each passing week his family grew smaller as his mother, father, two sisters, two nephews, an uncle and his wife, three cousins and their spouses, and children of two of those cousins were all killed in Israel's ongoing bombardment. In a desperate effort to save his surviving relatives, Mr. Harada applied on January 9, 2024 to bring 14 family members to Canada through a temporary resident visa program. While his sister and others managed to reach Egypt, bureaucratic delays and restrictive visa processing left most of his family stranded. As of August 19, 2024, of the 14 members he sponsored, only 2 of his spouse's unmarried siblings have been granted visas and were allowed to enter Canada. His family's situation remains precarious, while Tamer continues to grapple with trauma, unfulfilled Canadian assurances, and an uncertain future for his loved ones. The Genocide Convention is a cornerstone of customary international law, and as such is automatically adopted into Canadian common law as a means of combating the odious scourge that is genocide. The duty to prevent genocide is enshrined in Article 3 of the Genocide Convention, and it imposes a legal duty on states to act within their capabilities and to take all reasonable measures to prevent genocide when there are grounds to believe that it could occur. The duty is so important that it prevails over conflicting treaties or domestic law, thus reflecting the international community's recognition that it is imperative to prevent this crime of all crimes. Canada, as a party to the Genocide Convention, has a legal duty to act within its capabilities to prevent genocide when there's reasonable grounds to believe that it could occur. In this context, Canada's duty to prevent genocide compelled it to take all reasonable actions within its power to stop the assault on Gaza. Although Canada hasn't always succeeded in preventing genocide, it has a well-established track record of trying to do so by taking meaningful actions against perpetrators and providing meaningful support to victims. But instead, as has been outlined by my colleague Mr. Lascaris, over the past year, Canada has taken no meaningful action to exert diplomatic, economic, or military influence over Israel, even while hundreds of Palestinian Canadians, including Mr. al-Baghdadi, desperately tried to escape Israel's indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. Canada took no action to restrain Israel. Worse still, it facilitated record levels of arms exports, engaged in military cooperation, allowed groups in Canada to recruit volunteers for the Israeli military, and failed to stop organizations with charitable status from subsidizing the operations of Israel's Ministry of Defense. Canada's actions and omissions towards a plausible campaign by Israel to destroy the Palestinian people of Gaza violated its duty to prevent the crime of genocide, a duty imposed on it by the common law and the Genocide Convention. The Charter forms part of Canada's Constitution and protects the civil rights of Canadians against government action. Sections 7 and 15 of the Charter are engaged by this claim. Section 7 of the Charter provides that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. The guarantee of fundamental justice applies to deprivations of security of the person by foreign state actors if there's sufficient causal connection between Canada's conduct and the deprivation. This does not require direct causation, but rather a meaningful or substantial link between Canada's actions and the harm suffered, where the harm is a foreseeable consequence. Mr. El-Baghdadi claims that Canada's failure to take all reasonable measures within its power to prevent Israel from committing the crime of genocide against the Palestinian people, in addition to its collaboration with Israel, contributed to a deprivation of physical and psychological security of the person while he was attempting to survive and escape Israel's military bombardment of Gaza. Section 15 of the Charter provides that every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination. The claim alleges that Canada discriminated against Mr. El-Baghdadi and Mr. Harada in two ways. First, Canada discriminated against Mr. El-Baghdadi when it failed to take all reasonable measures within its power to prevent Israel from committing the crime of genocide, arbitrarily departing from its history of fulfilling that duty in other plausible cases. Second, Canada discriminated against Mr. El-Baghdadi and Mr. Harada when it denied them access to reasonably functional immigration and evacuation programs such as those it provides to Canadians seeking refuge for themselves or family members from other parts of the world. Canada's conduct was based in whole or in part on Mr. El-Baghdadi and Mr. Harada's race, religion, or ethnic or national origin as Palestinians and Muslims. In closing, Canada's failure to fulfill its duty to prevent genocide, even amidst glaring warning signs, is an omission of such egregiousness that it would shock the conscience of Canadians. Such shock would be compounded further by the fact that Canada maintained its course of conduct in the face of full knowledge of the potential risks. And for these reasons, the Coalition for Canadian Accountability in Gaza has filed this claim seeking declarations from the Ontario Superior Court that Canada has failed these duties and has violated the rights of Mr. El-Baghdadi and Mr. Harada. And now I'll welcome Mr. El-Baghdadi to share his comments as well with us.
Good morning. My name is Hani El-Baghdadi. I'm Palestinian Canadian from Gaza who lives in Ottawa. Almost 1 year ago today, I stood here in a press room on Parliament Hill to tell my story. Last November, I came to tell the government of Canada out of shock, trauma, and sadness that I had to take immediate action to stop what seemed like at the time potential genocide in Gaza. I am deeply heartbroken and energy that Canada did not listen to me. Instead, in the last year, it has carried on business as usual with Israel supporting it, adding it to facilitating this death and destruction throughout Gaza. The fact that I am still hurting and standing here before you today means that I am one of the lucky one. In November 23, I narrowly avoided death when attempting to escape from Gaza. The Canadian government did not send military aircraft to evacuate me like it did for more than 1,000 Israeli Canadian and permanent residents. It did not help me at all to reach the Rafah border crossing. It let me make my way on my own 4 times, waving through bombardment, making my way through the rubble destruction and dead bodies. Seeing the dead and the dying, it is a miracle that I am here today. I didn't die from bombing, disease, or starvation and avoiding getting shocked in the head, although I feel to the ground from the shock of bombing blast that made my ears bleeding. I survived, but people I cherish did not survive. I lost my niece Hiba and her 2 young children. My sister Najah was shot by the Israeli sniper. She remains in a critical condition with no access to medical care to this day. I have survived as witness to what was lost and what can never be replaced. And since I last spoke in this press room 1 year ago, our Prime Minister has not looked me at the eye. He has not came to grave for loss of Palestinian lives. Instead, he has declared his support for Israel in countless ways. I am behind the grief striking that our government, instead of finding way to use the influence to encourage Israel to stop its slaughter in Gaza, has pleaded its commitment to support Israel. Our government impose no red lines on Israel, no matter how terrible Israel crimes. Our government refused to withdraw its support for Israel. Palestinian Canadian lives matter. Palestinians matter. We are human beings. We deserve compassion and support and dignity. While Canada has been outspoken about Russians' war in Ukraine, giving money and weapons and support for the protection of Ukraine, it has purposefully let Palestinians die and suffer. Today, my legal team is my voice. It speaks in a language that Canadians cannot silence with the force of law and the values of a human right and international law. I have filed a legal action in the Ontario Supreme Court, an action that forces Canada to recognize my humanity as a Palestinian Canadian. This action puts Canadians in notice that it cannot ignore the rights of Palestinian Canadians. It cannot turn a blind eye to our pain. It cannot assist the very country that is destroying and killing Palestinian lives, and at the same time pretend to be a law-abiding. Canada will count for us action in a court of law. This is not an action for money or materials. Compassionate. We are asking the court simply to declare that our rights matter and that Canada is responsible for filing Palestinian Canadians for ignoring international law and for disregarding it is basic responsibility to take all responsibility measures in its power to prevent a genocide. The world is waiting. Canada, we wait for response. Thank you.
We're now happy to take any questions from the media.
Yes. Hi. I just spoke to the Minister Joly. Yesterday, the UN rapporteur for Palestinian territories were here, Francesca Albanese. She said that Canada violated international law because there is a genocide in Gaza, in Palestine. And Minister Joly just said that she basically Canada was doing exactly what the rapporteur tell them to do. So, but yesterday the rapporteur was really clear. Canada is violating international law. So what's your comment about that? And is Canada doing what Mrs. Jolie said?
I would have loved to have heard Madame Jolie explain precisely in concrete terms what it is that Canada is doing to fulfill its obligations. As I indicated in my opening statements, and the extraordinary UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, has specifically talked about this, Canada continues to send military equipment to Israel. Canada is even buying military equipment from Israel and thereby enriching the military contractors that are complicit in the mass murder of Palestinians. And I mentioned the fact that charitable status is being accorded by the Canadian government to pro-Israel organizations funneling money to Israel, whitewashing its crimes. Canada allows Canadian citizens to fight in Gaza on behalf of the Israeli military. In the case of Ukraine, Madame Jolie, or I should say Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, threatened any Canadians who fought on the side of Russia with prosecution. Not only was there no threat in this case, but the government knows that there are Israelis, Canadians fighting in Gaza where war crimes are being committed on a daily basis. So I could go on and on. There is simply absolutely no meat on those bones. Madame Jolie is making empty declarations that are not backed up by any evidence. And we look forward to proving in a court of law that Canada has failed abjectly to fulfill its obligation to prevent genocide.
I have another question.
Sure.
At the light of the US election today, what do you think Canada can do for Palestine, for peace in Palestine, in the conflict, despite the audit, in the bonus of the audit? What do you think Canada should do besides stopping every affair they have with Israel?
Well, I think what we have to understand is that no matter who was going to win the U.S. election, Palestine was going to lose, insofar as what the response of the U.S. government was going to be. We know that Vice President Kamala Harris was entirely involved in the shipment of practically all of the arms that Israel used to devastate and demolish Gaza. We know that now President-elect Trump is also intentioned to assist Israel however possible in trying to complete its mission of destruction. I think that right now this needs to be a wake-up call to people to continue to mobilize, to continue to raise their voices against the Canadian government. Canada should be speaking out just as much as it should be speaking out against what Israel's doing. They should be speaking out about what the United States is doing. The United States is the largest arms supplier to Israel. If it wasn't for the United States sending over 2,000-pound bombs, we wouldn't see what's happening right now. We wouldn't see this devastation. They're just as guilty, they're just as complicit as Israel is, and Canada needs to be speaking out against both countries.
Do you think it's possible?
To speak out against the United States, it's imperative. It has to happen.
Yeah, but is it possible?
Under this government?
Yeah.
No, this government has no interest in it. That's not where their priority. Pardon?
Under what government could that change?
That's up to the people to determine, but certainly not under this one. This government has been nothing short of complicit with what's happening, as Mr. Lascaris outlined, whether it's through letting charitable organizations subsidize the operations of Israel's Ministry of Defense in contravention of CRA policy, allowing organizations to recruit volunteers for Israel's military in violation of the Foreign Enlistment Act, continuing military cooperation between Canada and Israel under the Canada-Israel Strategic Partnership. These are all just a few examples of what Canada is engaged in right now, in addition to continuing to ship arms to Israel in violation of the Arms Trade Treaty. So this government has no priority whatsoever for standing up for the Palestinian people, and that's why the people themselves need to stand up to this government.
Right, and my last question would be, as I'm the only media here, do you think that mobilization can be still a way to change people's minds? Not government's minds, but people's minds.
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said mobilization?
Yeah.
I think at this stage we need to use every tool in the toolkit. Civil society needs to come forward and persist in mass demonstrations, engaging even in civil disobedience where necessary and appropriate. We need to have petitions brought forward in Parliament drawing attention to the complicity of Canada in this genocide. We need to have legal actions brought. This is just one. There is another one actually pending in the courts of Canada relating specifically to the transfer of weapons to Israel. and there may well be others in the future. So there are also boycotts. Civil society can make a difference by not doing business with corporations that are complicit in Israeli genocide. If we use all of the resources and tools at our disposal, we can bring this to an end.
Courts, can Canada be, you said this government was complicit, so is there any way the law can do something?
We certainly believe that if we're granted the relief we're requesting in this case, which is a declaration that Canada is violating its obligation under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention to Prevent Genocide, that will be a very black mark on the record of this or any other Canadian government, and that will place enormous pressure on the government to act, but also it can become a legal basis for further actions involving more dramatic forms of relief, like injunctive relief or monetary compensation. But we're just one of the many lawyers around the world who are taking legal action. There's legal action being taken in the courts of Netherlands. There's legal action being taken in the United States. We are part of an international legal movement to bring justice to the Palestinian people.
Can it lead to something, this collective action towards?
We certainly believe so, otherwise we wouldn't be here.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference. Ceci conclut la conférence. Merci.
Hi, I'm Faisal Baba. I'm an associate professor of law at Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto. I've joined with this team of lawyers to represent these two clients, Mr. Tamer Jarada and Hania Batnigi, in this challenge to the Canadian government's failure to fulfill its legal obligations. We've been deeply saddened and outraged by the failure of this of our country, of this particular government, to take meaningful action as it has in the past to stand up for peace, stand against war, and take action to prevent genocide. We have credible information from credible sources, including the International Court of Justice, raising the alarm bell about the conditions in Gaza, and we have a Canadian government that, by its own description, is closely aligned with Israel, and yet it has failed to take any meaningful action whatsoever to halt that country's genocidal conduct in Gaza.
My name is Yaver Hamid, and I'm part of the Coalition for Canadian Accountability in Gaza with my colleagues on probably one of the most important domestic and international human rights issues of our time. 1 year ago, we were on Parliament Hill with Hania Batnigi and Tamer Jarada, virtually putting the government of Canada on notice about what was then an evolving situation which we believed was genocide. Today, the facts have only worsened, with tens of thousands of deaths, with tremendous atrocities, and we've seen the government of Canada simply double down in its position in assisting Israel. There needs to be resistance. There needs to be resistance through the vehicle of law, and our coalition is putting this question squarely before the courts, and we hope to set an important precedent for holding our government accountable for what it has not done and what it should be doing to take all reasonable measures to prevent the crime of genocide.
Okay, so it's being replaced by the Israeli lobby, who does not represent the Canadian people or any people around the world, but justice and freedom for some, the bureaucrats, the elites of the world, whatever. Third banana republic countries, so that I don't like to call them third banana republic countries, and you know why? Because I come from a banana republic, Colombia, where the president of Colombia said to Israel, F off. We don't agree with you, we are not with genocide. Why? Because Colombia have lived genocide since 1492, fighting terrorism since 1492. The same with Central and South America. So you will do good, Canadians, as I am, from European ascendance. You, born in Canada, I'm not born in Canada, I'm immigrant, should understand is that we have a lot of experience in this, and you should pay attention to what we're saying. Otherwise, you're going to bring the war home. Whether you like it or not, you're this close for that to happen. And with the elections of the United States of America, make sure that's going to happen. If you vote for me as Prime Minister of Canada, will make sure that I will be surrounded by the most effective people in order to avoid that from happening. If we have to break some understanding with the United States when it comes to war, I'm all for it. Canada can't survive on its own. But we want to have relationships with other parts of the world, especially the United States, but we are not going to let the United States impose a 1492 identity with what the Indians were in those days. The people of the world are sick of war, and we know that you are not for freedom or liberty, not equality, fraternité, l'égalité, and neither democracy. So if you vote for me, I'm going to make sure that Canada leads the world, and I mean it, in a better condition, in a better approach, instead of wars, and of course to make sure that the lobbyists, whatever and wherever they come from, whether from the tobacco industry, whether arms and weapons industry, whether Israel lobby, what oil and gas industry, no lobby is going to take public decisions from the people without the people, period. And with that premise and the evolving economy, which is something that I have gathered, I've coined that evolving economy, is something that has to do for people that can give an example for the rest of the world, a society, a nation, in this case Canada, that can give the rest of the world a different approach for wealth, for understanding. No poverty is acceptable in the 21st century. Canada will give that example if you vote for me. Federico, that is FDRC Molano, elections 2025 at gmail.com. All right, guys. What else I can tell you? This is not the first time that Canada is behind these matters. I have to show you a special report that many of us have not seen, and many of you are correct here, have not seen. And if you have, well, let's take a look at it. Okay, to not make this program any longer, I just have to say, guys, that we are at the verge of extinction, and the climate change is real, and we are right now, right here, in front of, with our eyes wide open, watching how these politicians, these plutocrats, these irresponsible people, these genocidal minds are taking over the world for so long that it has to come from Russia some smart common sense that says, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. We are going to oppose you with whatever we have. And now that Donald Trump is going to attack Iran, and it says that it's going to attack Iran, and it's going to put Iran, it's never going to let Iran have weapons of mass destruction. The president of Iran and Khamenei has said, listen, we're going to reconsider our religious position that as an honor country, a country that honors its constitution and its people, we are going to reconsider the fact that we're going to have to enrich uranium in order to have how to defend ourselves from you, America and Israel. Now, as you have seen, Israel has been attacked in the last few days, but the attacks are not like the indiscriminate like the Jewish state or the state of Israel is done. They already killed more than 3,000 people in have displaced hundreds of thousands. They have killed more than 186,000 in Palestine, and that was 6 months ago, according to the Lancet. I say it again. And I trust the Lancet in this case more than with the pandemic, even though the Lancet excused themselves and corrected somehow its information and its data, but way too late after the people have suffered what the elites of this world consider us to be. Cattle. Nothing but cattle. You can send them to die, whatever. They don't care. And this demonic view of the world is part of the Talmud, in which the Jewish people is the only people to live in the world. And you already know that it's not difficult to understand with all this propaganda, the media, Facebook, YouTube, all these channels, BBC, all this owned by Disney, only 4 companies owning hundreds of information outlets. The alternative media, which is this, for example, I'm risking my life saying these things, especially here in Canada with B63. But what you just saw is going to change that. And I hope that you understand that this has to stop for the benefit of humanity. And as Israel and the United States, Canada, and the European Union intelligence apparatuses believe and are convinced that there's friends up there, I mean extraterrestrials, that are for Israel. So that's also some of the reasons they support them for or by. They're not the only ones either. Jesus said it himself. The struggle is not against flesh and bone, flesh and blood. It's against principalities, dominions, kingdoms in the heavens. And we are in the 21st century, we should consider that. Remember, I said it here first many years ago when I confronted Mike deGrasse Tyson and his views about UFOs. For us, for the country, for the world, hope to see you next time in the next edition of React Today as part of the World's Way Out project. I thank you guys for watching this show. Please give it a like, comment on the program. I'm going to make a live interview like I have. And please, read the books so that you can understand that, but read especially this one, because right now, if we don't call our true God, not Genesis 12 only, Genesis 12 is debunked by Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, all the major prophets, but especially and uniquely by the New Testament and you Christians, evangelicals that pretend to know and follow your pastor like blind sheep, and Catholics react today. You're being deceived. Read John 8. Read the Bible, for Christ's sake. Read the prophets. If they are so good to God, why do God needed to send him prophets? I mean, them prophets. And all of us, Christians, think about it and make a decision, because I already did. For us, for the country, for the world, hope to see you next time in the next edition of React Today as part of the World's Way Out project. Au revoir. Bye-bye. Hasta pronto.